Three college boys sighting, Greater Manchester, UK. Report of a baboon-like creature seen running along the edge of a stream banking. Witnessed by three males around the age of 16 to 17 years old. The boys say that they were playing truant from college and are unwilling to give their names. They were smoking cannabis and also drinking beer. The animal was reported to be roughly the size of a man. It had features of a baboon-like creature whilst upright, but once the animal was down on all fours, it resembled more of a canine, wolf-looking creature. They stated that they had had 3 or 4 beers each and shared 2 joints between the 3 of them. They were laid back, relaxing in the sunshine when they heard movement on the opposite side of the banking, coming up from the stream. One of the boys saw it first and then got the attention of the other 2. When it was first spotted, it was travelling on all fours in the direction of the water flow. The boys said that as the animal moved to the far left, it seemed to slow down and sniff around as if it could smell them. It then got onto its back legs and slid down a mudslide, rear legs first, like a human would do, not a dog. They say after it had slid down the mudslide, it disappeared into trees following the flow of the water. They state that it took them at least a good 10 to 15 minutes before they had the courage to go over and see where it went. They finally managed to get to the point that they lost sight of it and noticed that the water disappears in some kind of cave system. The boys state that they were in no shape whatsoever to even attempt to follow.
He says he was wild camping near Bolton and had just finished setting up camp as the sun was setting and dusk was easing into night. He was ready to relax and enjoy some quiet time to himself. He picked a spot next to 2 fallen trees by a stream. Nothing could have been more peaceful. Just as he was settling in, he heard a noise from the stream. He wasn't sure what it was. He perked up a little and listened. Was something moving down the embankment? Quickly, he grabbed his binoculars and twisted around to get a better look. He had to climb over one of the 2 fallen trees to do so, but curiosity was driving him now, so he didn't mind. He scanned the area once, but he didn't see anything. Looking around with his naked eye, he noticed some root balls where some trees had been pushed over, and he brought the binoculars back up to get a better look. He slowly searched across the tree roots looking for something, anything, that might have made that sound. Then he swept back across, still looking for the source of the noise. That's when he saw it. Sitting on top of one of the root balls was something he'd never seen before, not in England anyway. It was as big as a lion and covered in hair. He thought it looked like a cat, but he wasn't sure. After all, a cat as big as a lion in the UK wasn't heard of. An adult male lion can weigh in at 400 pounds. That's nearly 29 stone in Brit speak. At first he saw only its head and shoulders. It blended well with the tree roots with its dark fur, but its eyes were visible. He couldn't help but notice them because this thing was staring right at him. They locked eyes for a moment before it turned, ran across the ground, jumped over the stream, up the other side of the bank and into the woods. He was never able to identify what kind of animal he was looking at that night. The shock and fright were enough to drive reasonable thought out of him. Whatever it was, he knew one thing. It didn't belong in Great Britain.
We're in a place where the witness told us that the animal he saw came from inside a building, which is a new one on me. Now, let's just quickly rewind to a couple of months ago when I was making the film in the tunnels. It was the last video I put up on this channel. Now, whilst we were putting everything away, a guy turned up, and this guy looked like a extra from Romper Stomper. If you don't know what that movie is, I'll put up a picture up of what they look like in that film. Basically, a skinhead, tattoos all over his neck, tattoos on his hands, like a tattooed tear under his eye. He looked like a right double-hard bastard, Now, he comes jumping over. What are you doing, lads? What are you doing? So I said, we're just making a film about the river. What? He said, dressed like that. And I've got all my Dogman gear with my knife strapped to me and my bloody radio. And I said, well, yeah, actually, I've been in that cave that's under here. He jumps back, he says, you must be effing mad. So I said, well, it's all right. He said, it's not. I said, it's not going to collapse or anything. He said, no, you must be effing mad because of all the weird shit that goes on around here. So I looked at him and said, what do you mean weird shit? You know, people, they see cavemen and wolfmen and ghosts and all sorts of weird shit around here. So with that, I said, well, actually, I'm down here looking for weird shit like that. So I quickly explained to him what the YouTube channel was about, what we do. He stood and listened to it all, and he didn't raise an eyelid, he didn't smirk, anything. He then proceeds to tell me that he's seen something like what we're looking for. So I'm like, this is good, I'll have a bit of this. I said, sit down, tell me what you've seen. So he sits here, basically where I am. He starts telling me he saw this animal. So I said, when was it? He said he thinks it was 2019, August 2019. And he was fishing. In fact, he come clean. He said he weren't fishing, he was poaching. He had nets with him. And at the time, he was on this river, but a lot further up. I'll try and show you on a map where it is. A lot further up in the hills, the river gets a lot smaller. I think it actually changes its name to Eagley Brook or something like that. But he's on this river, and I knew when he said to me he was behind the old mill, the old paper mill, because I fished on that river as well. So I knew exactly where he was. And he says he was sat on the weir, deciding which way to put his nets out. So I asked him, is it the black weir that's got all the black stone on it and it's all crumbled? Yep. I said, so we're in the right place. I know where he is and what he's talking about, what he's explaining. So it becomes a bit more credible. He tells me he always takes a beer with him. So he's got all his stuff out of his bag, gets his beer, sits on the edge of the weir, cracks his can open, and then he said as soon as he cracked that can open, something made a noise up on the hill where the mill is. We just click to a shot of the mill now. If you look, there's like a muddy rock strained slope going up, and a couple of doorways up there. He said he's adamant that this noise came from one of them doorways, and the noise, he said, was wood scraping on concrete. When the doors swelled and you can't quite open it proper, and then soil and mud and rocks and stuff all falling. He said this noise was getting closer and closer and closer. Then it turned to branches breaking, and you're just your general, someone like running through a, my head keeps touching that, sorry, like someone, he said like someone or something running just through bushes. Now at first he's told us he thought it was a deer. Then he realised that how has a deer got in there? Must be a person. So this noise is getting closer and closer to the fence. Now the fence, if you just look on this shot, it's 10 feet away from where he sat. And this thing came right up to the fence. Now it's dark. He's not got a light on. It's not pitch black, but he says it's dark. I mean, he knew, he could tell something was stood there, and it weren't stood upright. So he then clicks to thinking it must be a deer then. So he gets his torch, puts his torch on it, and he said, F me, he said it was a dog, but a big dog. He said as big as nearly a horse. So I said, what colour was it? He said it was like a grey, browny, salt and pepper. A bit like my beard when it grows, a bit grey and black. I said, did it have a tail? I don't know. He said, I don't know if it had a tail. He said its ears were stuck up right on its head. So I asked him any other features. He said its eyes were glowing back, but not like a cat's eyes. He said he'd do it like a creamy white glow back. I asked him, could you see its mouth? He said, yeah, I could see its mouth, but with no teeth. Couldn't see any teeth on show. Just this thing staring at him. He says to me that he's in shock and he can't move. He doesn't know what to do. He's not quite sure what he's seeing. And then it cocked its head like that. It like did the movie. Dogs do that a bit. And he said that must have jolted him, must have woke him up. He said because all he remembers doing is grabbing the bag and running off, screaming and shouting like a baby, like a kid. He said, and look at me. He said, do I look like the kind of person who would run off screaming and shouting for the mummy? I said, no, you don't. He said, well, that thing scared me that bad. I was back to a 6-year-old boy again. So I said, and what happened then? What did you do? He said, I'd left everything. He said, I just went home. It never ever went back for it. All his stuff still sat there. I'm surprised that we never found it, actually.
Hurst Green Incident, 7:15 p.m, 30th of March 2021, St Joseph's Graveyard. The graveyard in question is within the grounds of the 16th century Grade 1 listed Stonyhurst College, Lancashire, within walking distance of the River Ribble to the south and also the River Hodder to the east. Miss Redacted recalls the incident happening late in the afternoon, not quite dark but heading towards last light. She states that as she parked her car outside of the gates, she didn't feel unnerved at all. With the graveyard being in private grounds and the local village being so close, she actually felt quite relaxed and was looking forward to having a look round. She was told that there was a mausoleum in the graveyard which housed a tolling bell, which apparently if the cord was there you could actually ring the bell. She says this was the main reason she wanted to visit the place, having never seen anything like it before. At first, she didn't want to admit to taking photographs on her phone of the headstones because she felt like it was a bit taboo. But as we talked, I managed to get that information out of her. Miss Redacted says that she made her way through the many graves heading towards the tall and imposing mausoleum whilst snapping photographs. She had been in there 10 to 15 minutes when she realised that darkness was setting in, because the automatic flash on her phone started to engage when she was taking pictures. Not too dark that she could not see where she was going, but realising time was getting on, she put her phone in her pocket and headed towards the mausoleum. She says that she was in her element because the cord to the bell was there, so she started to get excited and headed straight for it. She pulled the cord but nothing happened. Realising it must be quite a heavy bell, she pulled it quite hard and then, ding, it rang out. She says it startled her even though she was expecting some kind of noise. It was at this point that she started to get the uneasy feeling of being watched, and she started to get goosebumps and all of a sudden felt very frightened. She then says that she could hear something moving within the foliage at the far end of the mausoleum. When growing up, she helped out in the local stables and says that that sound she could hear in the bushes and the gravel reminded her of a heavy horse or quite a large animal. She noticed what at first she thought was a large black spider on the far corner of the building, moving slowly to her right. She realised it was a large black hairy hand connected to a wrist that was bending round the far end of the building. Then it puts its head around the corner to look at her. She states it was roughly 6 feet off the ground, with a very large head. It seemed out of proportion to the hand. Her mind found it very hard to work out what she was looking at, because everything was out of place to where it should be on a normal animal. I then asked her to describe what its head looked like. Very large dog-wolf mixed with a monkey, was the answer. I asked her if there was any strange smells or if she could hear anything. No smell, the breeze was at her back. She said she could hear it breathing, and even though she could not see its chest, it sounded massive. She says its eyes looked like it had cataracts, but it could definitely see out of them because it was looking straight to where she was standing. She says that she was in some kind of trance and felt as though time had slowed down, but admits this was mostly probably fear and shock. I have a theory that this animal was more than likely emitting some kind of infrasound. After what felt like minutes but was really only seconds, the animal tilted its head to the left. She said it was like something a puppy would do. This movement broke her out of the trance she felt she was in. Without thinking, she just turned and ran through the graveyard, heading back to her car. I asked her if she thinks it went after her. She says no, but she definitely heard movement, and to be honest, she thinks it was heading in the opposite.